What does it mean to be a winner? We're going to start with the scripture this morning. It comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Do you not know that in a race the runners all compete, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win it. Athletes exercise self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable one. So I do not run aimlessly, nor do I box as though beating the air, but I punish my body and enslave it, so that after proclaiming to others, I myself will not be disqualified. All right. You know how this works, right? And I love that we go back to this banner slide. I hope you are all seeing this as we intended it. A satirical look at how religion and football can get mixed up for some people, and how for some people football can become a religion in and of itself. And I get the confusion. We both operate on weekly patterns. You know, Pastor Pam was mentioning some of this earlier. If you're into pro football, it's on Sundays, just like church in the Christian tradition. Each calls for devotion throughout the week. Both invites their followers to don a certain garb. In football, that might be team jerseys. Yeah, I see that Gronk jersey back there, Chloe. Patriots. They're not in it this year, though, are they? They each invite people to don their special gear, their socks and their shoes, maybe their terrible towels if you're a Steelers fan, cheese heads for you Pack fans out there. In church, we see nicer than usual clothes when we come on Sundays most of the time for most of us. If you're really in the upper echelons of the church structure, you might wear a robe or a cassock or an alb or a stole. I don't know whether this bishop here on the right is a 49ers fan or a Chiefs fan, but he's wearing red, so he must be one or the other. Both football and religion inspire pilgrimages to holy sites. Israel to see the birthplace of Judaism or Christianity, or maybe it's to note the similarity in architecture here, folks. The thing on the left is the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. Both have their holy sites to them. With both hours of study and preparation are spent both by the teams, but also by the experts and analysts, dissecting the finer points of each at the very even intellectual level. We pastors spend hours getting ready for a service just like this, in worship, studying, preparing, practicing. The same goes for coaches, players, and even fans. To wit, does anybody have any idea what time the pregame for tonight's game starts? The game starts at what, 6 something? Pregame is on at 11 today. 7 hours of pregame, just reviewing everything about what's going to go on. Now, that's not even to mention the postgame analysis that's going to happen on into the evening, tomorrow, and on into the week, and then into the rest of the year. Now, I know that there's some post-worship analysis that often goes on around lunch tables, I'm sure. But I don't know, pastors. I've never heard of any pre-worship analysis that anybody does before they come to worship. I don't know, maybe. So there are correlations between football and religion. I could go on and on and on ad nauseum, but I'll spare you. Suffice it to say that I'm excited for today. It's Super Bowl Sunday. Because at the end of today, we're going to find out who the real winners are, right? And we're going to find out who the losers are. Because one team's going to be winners, and the other team, a bunch of losers. It's just like Paul said. Check this out. Do you not know that in a race all runners compete, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win it. I think that's what he's getting at here. It's a fascinating verse. Everyone runs, only one wins. I wonder if Paul meant that the rest are losers. I wonder if Paul's words here are just the first version of what we know from that spoof movie with the legendary Ricky Bobby and Talladega Nights. You remember what he said, right? If you're not first, you're last. That's what he learned from his daddy. If you're not first, you're last. In other words, if you're not the very best, then you just get lumped in with the rest. A loser. Y'all buying that? You look skeptical. All right. Well, one of the subplots of the big game today is precisely about who will become a real winner and who will remain a loser amongst the head coaches. This particular narrative will be played out on the sidelines. Andy Reid, he's the guy on the left, coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. He has led that proud and storied franchise back into prominence. We may remember him as a former coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. He had a pretty good record while he was here with the Eagles. But here's the thing. He never won the big one. He never won the Super Bowl. And in fact, Chloe, he lost to those 2005 Patriots when he inexplicably did not coach his team to hurry up in the fourth quarter when they were down by 2 scores. What happened there, Andy Reid? He's supposed to be this offensive genius. Well, for many Eagles fans, he's considered now a loser in the annals of history. They're not too happy about it. Across the field on the other sideline, we're going to see this guy on the right, Kyle Shanahan, coach of the San Francisco 49ers. He, too, has led his team back from a pretty terrible team just 3 years ago all the way to the Super Bowl. In just 3 years. This is pretty fantastic. But for him, 3 years ago, in that Super Bowl, they too lost, I hate to say it, Bob, to those Patriots, doggone it. They blew a... What? It happens, it does. But that's not what Falcons fans say when he blew a 28-3 lead as the offensive coordinator. It went down as the mother of all Super Bowl meltdowns. Ouch. So one of these guys is going to leave today with this monkey off his back. A real winner, someone will call him. Fascinating how winners and losers get pegged, isn't it? Winning is a powerful motivator, so much so that we hear it everywhere. Sometimes I think our country and our world is consumed with winning. In fact, I went back and I looked at some of the Super Bowl sermons that I preached previously, and I pulled one out from 2011. And in this particular sermon in 2011, I criticized then President Obama's repeated use of the word winner in his State of the Union address. I criticized it because it seemed like it was overly competitive. It seemed like it was narrowly viewed, narrowly scoped just to our country and our situation. Little did I know how much his successor, President Trump, would absolutely love the word winner and the word loser. Winners are those who dominate, losers are those who get dominated. So again, I remind us, if that's our definition of a winner and a loser, then by definition, Jesus was a loser. What do we think about that? Truth is, I think we strive to be winners a lot of the time so that we can be more powerful, so that we can be more in command, so that we can be more dominant. And really, that's all just to soothe these egos, to make us feel more important. We like to win. We like to win. And yeah, sometimes competition has the ability to bring out the best in us. It motivates us. It inspires us to have ever greater heights as individuals and teams and groups. Unfortunately, it can also bring out the worst in us. And that's not just on the field. I'm sure we've all seen this in so-called friendly card games. Meetings where we want to show that we're just the smartest person in the world, in the room. We want to beat the competition in business, don't we? We compare homes and cars and even grandkids. We want to have the best. We want to be the best. We want to be winners. This drive to win, in fact, sometimes compels us to do the unimaginable, to cheat. I'm I'm fascinated by people who cheat to win. Patriots. Those who are willing to do almost anything. Sorry, I got your kudos in there. I had to even the score. Those who are willing to do almost anything to get a victory. Those who set aside what they know is moral and honorable. Have you ever heard of marathon runner Rosie Ruiz? She initially won the Boston Marathon in 1980, but then it was later found out that she likely cheated and took the subway to close to the finish line and then ran across. Can you believe it? And she's not the only person who's done it. People have continued to do this very same thing in foot races in the years since. There's a story of a very otherwise successful doctor in California who did this time and time again in races. He would take a car or a public transit to close to the finish line, and he would go and enjoy the thrill of victory, I guess. It got so bad that he was actually banned from some races for doing this. He had such a reputation. Just 2 years ago, 3, I guess, 2.5, the Houston Astros, it was just discovered that they cheated their way to that World Series victory. Their head coach and general manager were banned from the sport for a year, and they got fired. The Astros get to keep the title, but there is a big-time asterisk right next to it. I wonder how the fans feel about that. I wonder how the rest of the players feel on it, those who weren't part of it, because it was a top-to-bottom thing. They get their title, but it's stained forever. And how about this? We've been seeing a lot of this in recent weeks. Who's winning here? Nobody. That's what I would say. It seems like the political soul of our nation is at stake as the Senate weighs whether or not to remove the President of the United States from office. And I think the only thing that maybe we can all agree on across the country is that nobody is winning. There seems to be a lust for power that has led to an outright unwillingness to cooperate between parties. And it has created a literal no-win situation. No matter what happens with this in the coming weeks, there will be no winners. And I think we can almost guarantee that our future, near future politics are going to be uglier and nastier than ever. And our country will be further entrenched and polarized and starting to see one another as enemies with very little of the sentiment of even talking about loving your enemies. We're certainly going to be talking more about that as this year progresses, as we move towards an election this fall, and how we as a people who practice peace, service, and openness to all can be real witnesses to that faith. In the meantime, we're going to continue to see the world as more than just winners and losers. You know, in all of these cases, whether it's the marathon runners, whether it's the Astros, the state of our politics, these so-called winners are losing a lot more than they think they've won. And that's where, thank goodness, we go back to Scripture and see the fuller picture. Because everybody races, one wins, and then the writer of this Scripture goes on. Athletes exercise self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable one. So I do not run aimlessly, nor do I box as though beating the air, shadow boxing. But I punish my body to enslave it, so that after proclaiming to others, I myself should not be disqualified. If the lust to win distorts who we are, then just like that Scripture says, we will be disqualified. Just like those marathon runners who cheated, DQ, disqualified. If we lose who we are in order to win, we ultimately have won nothing at all. And clearly, this racing metaphor is used for life. And Paul is saying this life and beyond. And I want to say that whether or not you view this imperishable reward as something that's at the pearly gates, or whether you just view it as your legacy of how you will be remembered and the impact that you've had on the world, the message is still the same. How are we going to run the race? How are we really going to be winners? Are we going to run it with the discipline of an elite athlete, but measure our greatness how? Not with individual glory. Our measure of greatness, just like it says here, is in how we share it with others. And it's here we do well to remember how Jesus won. Why Jesus is not a loser. He won not by overpowering his opponents and enemies, not by dominating them, but by love. An unswerving commitment to God and neighbor. And I'll add that victory through love was just as baffling a concept in Jesus' time as it is now. It was no easier then. In fact, may have even been more difficult. How do we really become winners? Now, I know that Jesus way doesn't make a great halftime or pregame pep talk. I know that talking about love doesn't always quite cut it when we want to get people pumped up. You're not going to win many ball games by saying, go out there and outlove your opponents. Well, here's the other big story that's been in the news this week. The untimely death of Kobe Bryant. Famous basketball player. It has dominated our news cycle. And to be honest with you, I'm not quite sure how I feel about all of it. He was a complicated guy. Now, on one hand, it's always sad when somebody, especially a public figure, dies suddenly, especially when there are kids involved, as was this case. He was on the plane or on the helicopter with his daughter and other parents and kids. Terrible thing. On the other hand, I got to the point where I was wondering what else was going on in the world every time I turned on the news. Certainly there are things that were more important than Kobe. Now I know I'm out of hands, but on the other hand, he was a champion. He was a true champion. He played with all his heart and soul, and that was admirable. He was a 5-time NBA champion. As much as I hate to say that as a diehard Phoenix Suns fan, he put the hurts on us most of the years he played. And again, on the other hand, he was accused of rape. At best, in that situation, as he admitted, he cheated on his wife. The case was later settled out of court. But on the other hand, I thought it was fascinating how people have remembered him. I think the memories at their best, people acknowledge that he was a complicated individual, like all of us. None of us are perfect. Not all bad, not all good. We do our best to run this race. But what came through as the ultimate measure of who he was, even though he was a fantastic basketball player, people, his peers, mentioned time and time again how he turned his life around and how he became a devoted father, a great husband, somebody who was a multi-millionaire doing a million things at once, even in retirement, but who took time for people, who seemed to really care about people. That's what made him a winner in the end. So, we're all running this race together. We're all in this game together. As you watch the game tonight, I encourage you to root for both coaches, because they're both winners. And after the game, you'll probably see, if the cameras show it, you'll probably see a group of players who see the higher things in life, and they will gather to pray. The winners and the losers, they're together. What a beautiful symbol of what it's really all about. Everybody can be a winner.